So I was on vacation just recently, and we were connecting through Miami and coming home, and as we took off from the airport, noticed that there were some storm clouds moving along the coast, as you can see right here in this image here. And I was very intrigued by what I was looking at and didn't have my camera handy. So fortunately, I had my iPhone. And from my window seat, was able to take this shot. In fact, you can see the airplane engine right here in the lower right corner. But I did manage to get a pretty good shot of the ground here, these kind of marshlands here, and the clouds and the sky and everything like that. Looked pretty cool. Now, I didn't know if or what or if I was going to do anything with this image when I took it, because I thought it looked pretty cool. But now that I actually looked at it a little bit closer, I actually figured out a pretty cool way of using it. And this is kind of the real point here, is to use your camera phone, and if you're a designer or just you like to experiment in Photoshop, use it in that way of looking at things and then taking a picture of it and then trying experimenting different things with it and see what you can come up with. Now, this is just a simple exercise of taking this image and making it look like a nuclear explosion. I can actually see the kind of shape is happening here, and there's only half of it. But let's just see what we can do to make it look like that inside of Photoshop. So going to first, let's go ahead and copy the image. I'm going to go ahead and do select all, and we'll go into edit and do copy. And I've gone ahead and created a new document. I'm going to build this in. It's a little bit wider format. So we'll go under edit and go to paste. And it came over really big. And this is another great thing about the iPhone especially, is that it can take pretty good resolution photo. Not super high res, of course, but it does take something enough that you can work with in a program like Photoshop here. Now, let's go ahead and scale this in a little bit more. Right about there, so we can work with that. All right, so now I'm going to make that and make a duplicate of the layer by pressing Command J. And let's go under Edit, go to Transform, and choose Flip Horizontal. I'm just going to take this and drag it over. And as you can see, there is something really interesting starting to take shape here just by flipping it and mirroring the image. So what I'm going to do is, I got this harsh edge on this one side. So let's go ahead and add a layer mask to this layer. And I'm going to go over here and grab the gradient tool. And let's just take the linear gradient. Again, going from foreground to transparent. It can really go from foreground to background if you like, or black to white. But either way, we're just going to draw the gradient here just so we get a nice fade from one image to the other. Now I can see that these two light cloud areas in the center need to be more looking like one element here. There we go. That looks like it might work pretty good. In fact, I might even extend the mask just slightly so we can see more of that lighted area. There we go. So now we're seeing more of that inside area, and that's where like the actual explosion would be happening. So that positioning looks good. Let's go ahead and press Command or Control E and merge those layers down. And now you can see the graphic is really starting to look pretty good. Now, got the small parts of the airplane engine still in the shot here, so I'm just going to do a selection here. And do a simple content-aware fill. And I will go ahead and eliminate that area nicely. There we go. So now I'm going to go ahead and scale this image so it fits in my layout here a little bit better. And I'm not really worried about disproportionately scaling it because I want it to be a little bit more vertical. Kind of like the real thing. Something like that. There, that looks pretty good. So already we've got a rather interesting looking image here simply by taking that graphic, flipping it, and then applying a few things to it to give it a more interesting look. We're actually looking at, this could be, already it could be kind of an interesting background element or whatever. But why stop there? Let's take it further. So we're going to go over here into the Layers panel. Let's create a new blank layer. Actually, before we do that, let's throw that away. Let's add a hue and saturation adjustment layer. And we'll do a colorize, and let's kind of give it like a really hot red color here. That looks like it might work. And then we're going to change the blend mode of this image. Now you can try a number of different blend modes. You can see what multiply does. Kind of gives me a dark, mysterious look to it. Soft light. Maybe even overlay. Overlay looks pretty good. I like that for now. Let's go ahead and leave that. So go ahead and grab and add a new blank layer above that hue saturation adjustment layer. And let's go and get the gradient tool. Now this time we're going to use the radial gradient, and let's make sure that we are in fact using the foreground to transparent gradient, but we're going to change the foreground color to white. So we'll just flip those colors around. We're going to add a gradient right here in the center. I'm just going to hold down the shift key and just drag down. Puts that gradient right in the center of the image, and I'm just going to change that layer blend mode to overlay. And you can see it brightens up that little center area pretty good. Now if I make a duplicate of that layer by pressing Command J once more, you can see it gets that much brighter. Really looks like there's a big explosion happening right here in the middle of this image. You can even do it a third time if you want to get even more apocalyptic. Very big explosion here. I mean, just a few simple layers and we've turned a simple snapshot from an airplane into what's coming together as a really violent explosion here in a very stylish way. So moving on, let's go ahead and create a merged copy of this layer as it is, this image as it is right now. So I'm going to hold down the Option key on Mac, Alt on Windows, and I go into the flyout menu here and choose Merge Visible. And what that does is create a merged copy of the entire image on a new layer. Now what I'm going to do with this is kind of give a sense of motion to this entire image. Now I could go ahead and use the radial blur, but that is a little too uniform for what I want here. So what I'm going to do is actually use the smudge tool. So go in the toolbar and grab the smudge tool right here and just use, you notice I've got like a little scattered element brush here. It's just a very, it's not, don't want to really use a solid brush, just, you know, one of these type of scattered element brushes here, just like that. And up here in the options bar, once you've got the brush selected, I'm going to select the, or set the strength rather, to around 25-30% is fine. And let's go in the image here, and what I'm going to do is just push things away from this bright center of the explosion. And I'm just kind of just nudging things. Like I said, kind of keeping in mind that that center explosion is the obvious center of activity here. Or ground zero, whatever you want to call it. And I'm just pushing these elements away. Now I'm not worried about if I do too much, because this element is on its own layer. I'm going to minimize that in just a moment. But I'm just kind of brushing these elements and kind of pushing them to give that sense of motion. Like this explosion is really pushing all these elements away from the center here. Now again, like I said, if it seems too much, you can see the simple turning on and off the layer looks okay. I'm just going to drop the opacity of the layer to around 60. And that blur element is maintained somewhat. In fact, I'm going to drop it to around 50. That blur element is there, but it's a little more subtle, and it does give me that subtle hint of movement in this overall explosion element here. All right, so we're looking pretty good. Now let's go ahead and add a text element to this finished graphic. Now one more element I did when I was playing around with this earlier is if you add another hue saturation adjustment layer. Well, in fact, let's go ahead and make a duplicate of the one we created a moment ago. I'm just going to select that layer, press Command J, and let's bring that adjustment layer up to the top here. And you can see it gets that much hotter and brighter. But if we just change the blend mode perhaps and drop the opacity down, we're adding more to that effect, but it's giving it a little bit more dense in some areas. But the full strength is just way too much. So a duplicate of the original adjustment layer, putting it above at the very top of the layer order, and just adds a little bit of richness to the overall image here. All right, so let's, like I said a little moment ago, let's add a text element to this. So I'm going to go ahead and grab my text tool, and let's just set a text layer. And we'll do Apocalypse. Now, that's not the font I want to use, actually. I'm going to use something a little bit more modern. Let's do... Where is it? There it is, Bank Gothic. There we go. That looks nice and cool. So I'm going to go and center this in the middle of my design here. Let's actually scale it down and actually space out the letters a little bit more by increasing the tracking. So I'm going to double click the text layer and just hold down Option or Alt on Windows and hit the right arrow key, and it just increases the tracking, thus increasing the spacing between the letters there. Now, as a final effect on this text, here's something really cool. Make a duplicate of that text layer, and then go into the filter menu and go to Blur, and choose radial blur. Now, it's going to tell you that it's going to rasterize the text, and that's okay because we made a duplicate of the layer, so we're fine going ahead and rasterizing it and applying the effect. So we're going to do, let's go ahead and make the quality at best. I'm going to set the amount to around 50 and set the blur method to zoom and keep it going into the center because that's right where the center of this this bomb is going off here. And click OK. Now you can see it gives me a blur on the text. I'm going to go ahead and press Command or Control F and apply it a second time, and you can see the blur gets that much smoother. Now let's add a layer mask to this blurred text layer. And then using a simple linear gradient, let's go ahead and set the foreground color again to black. Just press D on the keyboard. And we're just going to use the gradient on the layer mask to fade the text that's going beyond, that seemingly be going behind the text here. Just so we can see the lights kind of like going past the text there in a very interesting way. Now, the color is white, but let's actually make it look more like the orange, orangish yellow color in the background here. So just use the eyedropper tool to sample a color. Let's actually get a smaller sample. There we go. Lock the transparency on this layer containing the blur and just simply press Option Delete, and we'll go ahead and fill that element in there. And it really kind of gives a sense that that text is part of the environment and it's being affected by this explosion. But you can really get an idea of really how far you can go with this. I just took a simple shot taken with my phone. We went from this image as it was taken out of the iPhone, and then with a few simple tricks, you can turn it into something that you didn't think you might have had before. But this is, again, going back to the things I've always said, is experimenting and looking at images a little bit differently. Just put a little creative thought into it, and you can come up with some really interesting stuff with some relatively simple images.